Next slide. And so today we're going to go over a few things related to early childhood education in the state of Louisiana. One, we're going to talk about really what is it, along with what's the state of the state in early childhood education and the local view of early childhood, as well as what's the cost, why is it so important, and then a coalition that we belong to called the Ready Louisiana Coalition that really is about increased investments in early childhood education. Next slide. And so if we think about what is early childhood education, we're really talking about programs that deal with young children birth through age 4 in the state of Louisiana, programs like early childhood education supports and services. Next slide. And so what we know is that this time period of a young child's life, that birth through age 4, is the most critical time period of that little person's life. So much so that we see 1 million neurological connections every second for that little person. And so we know what happens early in life matters and has a long trajectory for us to see, so that children can really have a foundation for school, but not just school, but also to make sure that they're productive citizens in the workforce, along with being members and productive members of our community. Next slide. And so we know that children in Louisiana, if they have access to quality early childhood education, in Louisiana, and they are in a program that's accepting public dollars, that we know that they are experiencing a developmentally appropriate early learning experience. And that early learning experience really aligns with the Louisiana Department of Education's early learning and development standards. Additionally, for children that have support in our early learning communities and these Type 3 early learning programs, which means these Type 3 centers are part of our accountability system, that their educators are credentialed and evaluated annually, and we know that these environments are resource-rich and really beneficial to young children. Next slide. And so if we think about the state of early childhood education in Louisiana, this number is increasingly important. We know that we serve in Louisiana approximately about 60,000 children that are publicly funded. But we also know that we have over 130,000 children in need in Louisiana that remain unserved with early childhood education. The number is staggering. So we know that the need is there. Next slide. And so it's important to understand the funding mechanisms related to early childhood education. We get that question asked to us frequently. And there are two big pots of money. There's the federal dollars that are programs like that you've heard of Head Start, Early Head Start, Title I, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that we call IDEA for short, and then the state funds of programs like the non-public Early Childhood Development Program, along with 8G. And you'll see to really fund early childhood education in the state of Louisiana, it's blended. And so in the middle, you'll see that there are federal funds and there's state funds going into the Child Care Assistance Program, along with our LA4 program. And so if we think about that, particularly with our LA 4-year-old program, we serve over 80% of our 4-year-olds in the state that are in need. And we serve less than 30% of our birth to 3-year-olds in this state. And the next slide you'll see the funding. And so when you look at the funding, what's particularly important is you'll see like the state general funds that go into these programs, along with the federal funds. And you'll see all the different early childhood education programs in Louisiana, everything from the Child Care Assistance Program, Head Start, LA4, the NSCCD program that I mentioned earlier, 8G, Title I, and then you'll see the totals and the total dollar amount spent. Next slide. And so what you'll really see is that the majority of funding for early childhood education comes from the federal government. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our governor and our legislators for the increased investment that we've seen in our state over the last really 6 years. And that commitment has held on with our new governor, who he put in his executive budget for the new fiscal year at $78 million. But we know that there's so much more that we have to do. Next slide. And so what is equally important is if we're talking about the funding mechanisms of state and federal money, we also have to talk about the local investments that are happening in early childhood education in our state. And we know that local government and philanthropy have really made significant investments in early childhood education in Louisiana to expand access to quality early childhood. Next slide. And so you'll see here we have the Early Childhood Education Fund. That fund was established in 2017. It offers a dollar-for-dollar match as long as there are dollars in that fund. And what we've seen is that the funding expands high-quality early childhood education, birth through age 3. And that communities really, they raise funds and then they apply to the Department of Education and say, we've raised, let's say, $300,000 of local dollars, and we would like to apply for the fund, the Early Childhood Education Fund, to get a dollar-for-dollar match. And then that funding request goes from the Department of Education to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, where they make the funding request to the legislature for spending authority of the ECE fund. Next slide. And so you'll see here what goes into the fund, because that's always the next question. Okay, it's a dollar-for-dollar match. What is the funding mechanisms that go, or the funding revenue that go into the ECE fund? And what you'll see here is we have sports betting. We are able to earn 25% of sports betting up to $20 million. We also get a portion of fantasy sports betting, hemp, and CBD products, as well as the half of New Orleans Pelicans license plate, which is not a lot, but a little bit of a lot of things helps. And so that's adding to the total, along with the land-based casino, which is now, it used to be Harrah's, now Caesars in New Orleans. And then you'll see the interest earnings. And so local communities have really stepped up to say, if we want to make sure that we're creating more access for early care and education, but what you'll see subsequently is that the dedicated funding streams don't actually produce enough to match what locals are asking for. Next slide. And so you'll see here for the 24-25 ECE fund year, you'll see that we had 13 parishes, a number of parishes that requested a little bit over $30 million of the fund. And so if you looked at the revenue streams, and then you look at what's being requested, there is a hole there. The one good thing is back in the 2022 session, Governor Edwards at the time put in $40 million of leftover minimum foundation money, which funds K-12 education. And so that $40 million has helped meet the needs of locals lately. But again, the need is going to outpace what's in the fund. And so we're increasingly concerned about that. Next slide. And so over the last 3 years, there's been just an incredible increase in the number of children served because of this fund. But if the legislature is unable to grant spending authority of the full amount requested, so if there's not enough money in the fund and they can't give the spending authority to spend that, then children are actually going to lose child care seats. And we know that these child care seats are quality seats because any public dollar that goes into a child care center is part of an accountability system. Next slide. And so the cost of child care is immense, and for most families it is the single highest expense for their family, even above keeping a roof over their head. And so even with federal, state, and local funding for programs in Louisiana, infants and toddlers are still struggling to find access. Next slide. And so you'll see 82% of economically disadvantaged children ages birth through age 3 go unserved. So when you look at it in this graphic, it really is, it's a depiction of what our families are struggling with. And so you see the largest piece of that pie is federal dollars. The next is state government. You see local government, philanthropy, families. But really the burden of child care rests solely on the families, which is not the case for K-12 education. It's just a different viewpoint of the world. Next slide. And so we know that thousands of children are waiting for increased access to quality early childhood education. And so we serve approximately 18% of our in-need birth to 3-year-olds in Louisiana. And currently right now, the last number that we have from the Department of Education is there are about 6,100 children on the wait list for child care assistance. And if you're on child care assistance, it means that your parents are working or in school. And they need a place to put their little person to ensure that they're healthy, safe, and thriving and learning. Next slide. And so if we think about quality early childhood education, and we think about like the cost of higher ed, birth through age 4 is actually can be more expensive than a 4-year college degree if somebody finishes in 4 years. I was one of those people that finished in 4 years, but not everybody does. But if you look at the equivalent of it, it really, early childhood education costs more in our state than a 4-year degree. Put it in perspective. You hope that you have about 18 years to help try to save, even with TOPS, try to save for college education. When a family wants to have a little one, they don't have 18 years to save. And so it's just really hard for families to carry on that expense. They're doing it, but they're doing it at the detriment of figuring out how they're going to pay their rent, a mortgage, pay for food, maybe go to the doctor. Maybe they can go to the doctor and not afford medicine. Like, these are things that our young families are grappling with right now. Next. And so if we think about this, working parents, we know that they are struggling to afford childcare. And so this graphic really depicts what is going on. So you have a family of 4, 2 working parents, an infant, and a preschooler. And if you have an annual income, which 65% of our state median income is around $56,000, their survival budget is about $54,000, if we think about asset limited income constrained, our ALICE population. And then if they don't receive CCAP, if they don't have to pay for childcare, what their household net is, look at that 85% state median income. They're making almost $74,000. They have CCAP with a copay, and they're able to net about $15,000 a year because of having support with CCAP. But for a family that's 90% state median income, which is about $78,000 a year. So you have 2 working families, an infant and a preschooler. Their survival budget is what it is. They have to pay out of pocket for childcare. So we're close to $28,000 that they're paying out of pocket for childcare. And look at their net. And if you asked anybody in this room if they thought $78,000 was enough to raise a family, some people would go absolutely. But the numbers are here. And so we know that the median income for families is not enough to be able to sustain childcare, and that's why more families need access, and that's why more locals are stepping up to bat to figure out local access to childcare. And it's the reason that many businesses are stepping up to say, how can we figure out how we can help our employees and offer them a benefit of some sort related to creating access to childcare. Next slide. And so why early childhood matters. And I'm going to get into the business case now. We know that early childhood education really is the economic backbone. It is the thing that fuels all other businesses because it allows our children to be prepared for school and life, and allows communities to flourish. Next slide. And so fundamentally, early childhood education is a 2-generation approach. We know that early childhood education allows the children to thrive and learn and get kindergarten ready, but it also allows the parents to go to school and or work to take care of their little people, and it allows our economy to grow. Next slide. And so childcare in the short-term workforce is a short-term workforce issue, but fundamentally we know that 2/3 of Louisiana parents that have children under the age 5, either both of their parents, all of their available working parents are working. And that we know that 3/4 of working parents really report having issues getting to work or having some kind of hiccup related to child care. And that through a study that we did at the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children is that our state loses about $1.3 billion to our economy due to child care breakdowns. And you're probably like, how is that so? Well, it's so because if you don't have a reliable workforce, and you can't get your demands met, then you're losing money as a business, and you're losing business as an economy. Next slide. And so we know that the long-term benefits are great, especially within workforce issues. And so Council for a Better Louisiana, which is now Leaders for a Better Louisiana with Committee of 100, have done longitudinal work with our LA4 program. And what we've seen for children that have received just 1 year of a 4-year-old program is that they're more likely to graduate from high school. They qualify for TOPS, which is great. Additionally, TOPS Tech and TOPS Opportunity, they do better in math, in their English, along with biology, geometry, and they have fewer special education placements. And this is Louisiana's data. This is just for 1 year of a 4-year-old program. Imagine what we could do is if we really served children, if parents wanted their child in a quality center, what we could do if they had access for the first full 4 years of their life. Next slide. And so we know that childcare really is an economic development issue. It's a workforce issue. We want to make sure that families are able to work or go to school, and we know it's an economic development issue because when children experience high quality early childhood education for the first 5 years of their life, when they have that exposure, they're more likely to graduate high school. When they go to high school, they're more likely to get some kind of secondary education. They have better health outcomes. They are less likely to enter into the criminal justice system, along with they have lower rates of drug use. We've also seen lower rates of teenage pregnancy as well because of children having access to high quality early childhood education. Next slide. And so at the end of the day, one of the things that we often get asked is, what's the ROI? What's the return on investment? If we're going to spend this kind of money, and the state of Louisiana is putting about $78 million annually into our child care assistance program, what are we getting for this money? And what we're getting, based on Nobel laureate James Heckman, is we're getting about a 13% return on investment for every dollar that we spend. And when you look at the slope, the younger you are, the more bang you get for your buck. And so I mentioned earlier, 1 million neural pathways a second for a little person. We are building the foundation of their brain at every intersection that we can have with them. And so quality environments matter. And if a family wants to have access to quality environments, they should be able to have access and not have to figure out what they're not going to cover in their budget. And so making sure that we increase quality early childhood education is a workforce of today and tomorrow issue. Next slide. And so I also wanted to share with you about our Ready Louisiana Coalition that is now over 180 organizations strong. And this coalition is strictly about increased investment in early childhood education. And if we've seen the gains that we have seen over the last really 6 to 7 years, this Ready Coalition that happen to have some members in this room right now, besides myself, have worked diligently about increased investment and access to quality early childhood education in Louisiana. And so I want to share with you really the joint statement from the coalition. Next slide. And we want to make sure that we are able to ensure that a maintenance of $103.4 million into the 4-year-old program remains the same. We can't afford to lose any 4-year-old seats in our early childhood education system. Additionally, we have about $78 million in the governor's executive budget, for which we are exceedingly grateful for. If there was a way to get back the $9 million reduction that was lost last session, if we could get that back so we would have a state investment of $87.8 million in the child care assistance program, that would be beneficial to our working parents and to be able to really support the business of child care. Because fundamentally, the business of childcare is a small business that really is the economic backbone to our state. And then if there was extra money around and you just needed to get rid of some one-time type of money, we would really like to see an appropriation of at least $30 million into the Early Childhood Education Fund. Because as you saw earlier, the need is outpacing what's in the fund, and we want to make sure that after this new fiscal year that we're planning on a budget for now, that we don't run out in the 26-27 fiscal year. Because locals are raising money more and more. And so those are the three mainstays for the Ready Louisiana Coalition related to early childhood education. Next slide. And you can learn more about Ready Louisiana by clicking on this QR code and join us in the fun and making sure that children have access to quality early childhood education for today and tomorrow in our state. And I'm happy to take any questions now.
Where can we get a hard copy of this?
I can email it to you. I can do that. So the question was asked, where could you get a hard copy? I'm happy to email it to you. I can get it to John or to a member of the press club to get out to y'all. Yes, Cindy.
Libbie, I don't know if you said this, but 6,000 Louisiana families are on the waiting list for the Child Care Assistance Program. And, you know, we were in a committee today when they're looking at some tax credits for the child care industry, for the business part of it. And, you know, I was having to remind members of the committee that all of this investment in early care and education helps working moms and dads go to work or go to school full time to further their education. So, you know, the child care industry is the backbone of economic development and workforce development. You made this point, Libbie. But 6,000 working moms and dads, that's a lot. In Louisiana, I get messages every day saying, I'm going to lose my job because I don't have the ability to put my child in a safe, quality place while I go to work. And those are heartbreaking messages. And you know, we have to give big kudos to our governor for investing that 78.8, but we do need.
And Cindy makes a really good point. That's 61. Sure. So she did ask a question. She just kind of repeated back that there's 6,100 families children that are on a wait list for child care assistance. And what that means is parents can't go to work. And Cindy's in a position with the Child Care Association of Louisiana that she gets phone calls from families that are like, I can't go to work. I'm going to lose my job. And if you think 6,100 children are on a wait list, but we have over 100,000 children that are in need birth through age 4 in our state. People are giving up even getting on the wait list because they don't know if they'll get a spot. And so fundamentally, and one of the things Cindy mentioned as well, is that she reminds legislators for families that are in school that this is a way for them to take better care of their children, and they need access to quality child care too, because fundamentally child care is the economic backbone, not a economic backbone, the economic backbone to our economy in the state of Louisiana. Yes, sir.
With regard to your wait list, did y'all break that down by area or regions or parishes or, even within parishes, municipalities within?
So the question was related to the wait list. Do we have really the breakdown by parish, municipality, those types of things? The Department of Education, that's where we get the big number from. They can break that down that way. Yes, ma'am.
How are the school districts fundraising? When you say fundraising, this is coming from private money?
So the question is related to school districts fundraising and private money. The biggest thing is that early childhood education their community networks may sit in school districts, but not all do. And so if we think about early childhood education, it is very different than the K-12 system. And so most of early childhood education is paid for through parents' tuition. And so when we talk about revenue generating, is really what we're talking about, and locals figuring out revenue to increase access to quality early childhood education. You have places like New Orleans that passed a millage in 2022 for $21 million a year for 20 years. You have places like Jefferson Parish that their parish council all together figure out where they have discretionary funds to say this is how much we can put forth towards seats. You have places like Rapides Parish that they have the Orchard Foundation that has made critical investments that they can use those dollars for a dollar match. You have places like Caddo Parish with Shreveport that they've done philanthropy and some other public dollars. And so it's really about finding, whether it's philanthropy or other public dollars, local dollars, that's they're figuring out revenue generation and fundraising in a sense to make sure that they have access to these seats. Yes, sir.
When we're looking at everything is support to childhood education in preschool. But in your oversight, and you're always talking about the health and welfare, DCF, when they, a lot of controversies, and personally I know some things happen. Do y'all have any oversight, or do y'all make anything for other organizations in the state? Do y'all oversee, or y'all question anything that has to do with the health and welfare of those people?
So the question was around, do we look at and basically investigate anything related outside of early childhood education with like health and welfare? One, at the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. So we don't have oversight of anybody. We do research and data. But to your point, we have an initiative of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children called Go Far Louisiana. And it's spelled the Great Louisiana Way, G-E-A-U-X. And it's, the name of it's not by happenstance. If you want to go fast at something, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And part of what we're doing with Go Far Louisiana is looking at what does it look like for families and providers to be at decision-making bodies, because they should be at any place where decisions are made. What does it look like to make sure that we have a healthy start from the very beginning? What does it look like to have a net that works? So we all have networks in this room that we use professionally, but what does it look like for a family that has a net that works for them to connect them to those supports and services that they need, whether they're in the Department of Children, Health, and Child and Families, or whatever that might be. Another area is around childcare for everyone, everywhere. And then the fifth area is, what does a family-friendly workplace look like? And so what does that look like? Making sure we have lactation rooms and those types of things. But to your point about like really health and safety of children, if we think about access to quality childcare, early childhood education, we're looking at health and safety at every turn. And that also means that our teachers are mandatory reporters. And if they suspect something's going on, they're going to report that to make sure that those little people are taken care of. Yes, sir.
Just one other question. Early on, you were mentioning the sources of income for the programs that you operate. You broke them down by categories. Philanthropy, obviously, you're going to take anything that you get, and you're not going to look behind to see that, right, any dollar that, private you're going to take. But with regard to the money that comes to the program from such sources as HG funds, are y'all poised to examine whether the amount that y'all receive is the amount that you should be receiving, or is it just like, well, we'll take it, we got it,
Well, the HG funds help fund the 4-year-old program, and there's statutory language related to how much can be spent on early childhood education. And so another portion of the HG funds go to K-12 education and to higher ed.
I know that, but I mean, the question was, we all have the ability to determine whether the amount that y'all receive is the amount that you should be receiving.
So the question is the amount that we receive, do we have the ability to say that we should maybe receive more in essence because of the need? We always talk about what the need is. We talk about the numbers of children served versus unserved, particularly with the 4-year-olds. But again, there's a funding formulary there that has been put in statute. And so
Meaning the money that should be coming to the state from offshore revenues as a result of exploration and production on offshore HG funds.
So the question was really related to, are we getting, as the state, getting the money that we should be getting from offshore drilling? And we typically stay out of that hen house. Yes, sir.
Of the students that are in this, I'll call it pre-K programs, how much are those in religious back sponsored?
So the question.
Versus Montessori or something like that.
So the question was around the children that are receiving access to quality early childhood education, like the numbers of like faith-based versus a Montessori or that type of thing. I don't have those numbers offhand for me, but we do know we have a number of providers that are in this system of accountability that are faith-based. Fundamentally, to understand our early childhood system in Louisiana for early childhood education, we have a unified system. So if any child has any type of public funding, whether they're in a faith-based center or a Montessori program or this or that they have unified early learning development standards. They have teachers that are credentialed, that have been observed. There's also high-quality curriculum in those centers. And so whatever type it is, whether it's a religious or a Montessori or something else, those are the unifying factors to help us think about what quality looks like in an early childhood education setting, using an observation tool that measures teacher-child interactions and looking at the other things that I mentioned.
Any questions? If not, thank you, Dr. Sonnier.
Thank you.